All right. Hopefully you guys all see my screen. Looks like we're at the top of the hour, so I'll get going here. So thanks for attending. Move this around. Yeah, thanks for attending today. If you guys have questions, I think you can put it in some sort of chat thing. In the tool, chat Q&A, I guess, whatever button you can find, I suppose is fine. So should be sharing my screen. You should show how to automatically discover and diagram a network, a little PowerPoint slides. I'm not going to do all PowerPoint. I'm going to show you some stuff with respect to our tools. So this is Graphical Networks. That's the company. netTerrain is the product. I am Jason Sherman, bottom right corner person. It's my email. But if you got questions around sales and pricing, whatever, if you want to schedule a demo, Fred's the guy to speak with. So you could email him directly or just go to our website and find the button to press to request a demo or sign up to try it out. So usually what we do is a couple polling questions kind of thing. So the problem is you work hard without updated detailed network diagrams. You don't have the information you need to fix issues fast and go home on time. You don't have time to create network diagrams by hand and keep them up to date. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. Most people want to try and automate network documentation, which I think you can do to a certain extent. I mean, I think a tool like ours, there's other tools out there that do some discovery and some other features, functionality. Some are very, high-end type tools, very expensive, but do a great job. And others do kind of discovery, but they might be more limited in what they do and not so visual. So it depends on what you're looking for, kind of dictates, which we try and do discovery and kind of give you the visualization side of it, the actual diagram sort of side of the house where we can. So that's what we do. And that's what I'll talk about and kind of show and discuss a little bit as far as, how you can do a discovery and somewhat automate things with respect to the documentation side of the house. So, so the solution, automatically network diagram software, keep things up to date with maps, easy peasy. You can tell that's a marketing term, easy peasy, right? When I get into it, of course, there's always a little bit of work you got to do. So discover the network, create nice diagrams, in clicks, quickly pinpoint network problems, see what's impacted, being able to kind of see how things are connected and, if you do have an outage, what might be impacted. So, and hopefully reduce costs with respect to that automation. So polling questions, somehow I got polling questions I need to turn on. All right, polls, launch. So the first one is, current documentation. What are you currently using? It's multiple choice. It's always great to have multiple choice questions. So spreadsheets, Visio combination. Visio is kind of the typical, same with spreadsheets. See if you guys do that as well. Press the button, answer one or two of those questions. That'd be great. And yeah, so as sort of expected, most people are saying Visio or spreadsheet combination, and coworker that knows everything. That's pretty common, which is fine until they retire, right? And then other, so there's always other out there as well. So thanks for that info. We'll move on, but yeah, I mean, Visio is a great tool. You can do some great documentation with it, but it's pretty manual process usually. I mean, you can't do automation with it. They do have APIs, but I think it's a little more limited. It's a little more work, and you almost need somebody dedicated full time to that. But network documentation, honestly, is not something where you just say, hey, press a button and make magic happen. It can be a little bit tricky. I mean, for me, the big thing is just having a good process in place around documentation. So if you do things manually, you just got to make sure there's a process that says, hey, when you install the switch, make sure you go to the documentation and update and so on. But if you can automate, it's always a good thing. Sorry, poll number 2 here. This is the last one. Biggest headaches. Yeah, getting answers takes too long. You know, that's especially hard when you get into managing like fiber and fiber strands and stuff like that. Not that we really do a discovery around that, but we do have an outside plant piece and tool. You know, figuring out if you've got strands, are they available? You know, what's around, that kind of thing. But I guess that's true for all, you know, sort of connectivity and other things. So troubleshooting time prolonged. Yep, born employees figuring out capacity planning for the future. Yeah, hopefully keep your costs down. Keeping costs down is a big headache. Yeah, I know that feeling. So anyway, thanks again for that too. So I'll close that out, and then so let me switch gears, screens to good old. Where are you, netTerrain? Go find my Chrome. There we go. Oh, it was just not in diagram mode. I was creating a user account. So there's kind of three flavors of network documentation. There's what we refer to as sort of the physical documentation and logical. And you could kind of have a combination of logical / physical, I guess. Logical is usually more a diagram that maybe the direct, there's no direct excuse me. There's no true physical path necessarily shown in that type of documentation. That's the kind of the way I view it. And what I mean by that is you may have, you know, it may show sort of objects connecting to objects that in between there might be splicing, there might be patching and other things that you're not really showing. You're just trying to show a base high level view of how your network might connect. And a lot of times that's plenty, you know, documentation. Not everybody needs the what I refer to as more the physical, where you show true end-to-end connections, connectivity. What do I mean by that? Well, oh, sorry, let me make sure I close this poll out. So hopefully you guys are seeing my screen there. If not, just let me know. But you should see diagrams now as far as what's being shared. But if I, you know, true physical end-to-end connectivity, I'm just going to double click and drill down. This is our product netTerrain, by the way. Sometimes I forget to mention certain things like what you're looking at. So I'm just navigating our demo project here. And I'm going to go into this cabinet. Let's know what cabinets are. I got physical connections and equipment and so on. And I'm just going to navigate all the way to an endpoint device and to a port. And I'm going to double click this link. And this is going to build a physical path. And I'm going to get to sort of discovery here in just a second. I just want to show something like this. So this is what I mean more like a physical connection diagram, which is really truly port to port physical layer 1 or whatever layer you want to, you know, it's one of those real low level layers where you're true, you know, port to port connection. You saw fiber cable and things like that. That's the type of stuff you're not really going to discover, because if you have patch panels in between and they're more passive, then, you know, there's nothing to really discover. Now, what you may end up discovering is something like, well, I've got a router connected to another router that maybe is in 2 different buildings, or a router to a switch, or whatever the connections are. So that's where you get into more, okay, I want to do an automated discovery, but you're not necessarily going to get all the things in between splicing and splitters and so on. So what does that look like? And what are you hoping to sort of get from that? So from an automation standpoint, what we do, the way our tool works, and again, it's not necessarily the right fit for you guys, so you got to determine that and see if it is, because you want to make sure you get a tool that you're going to use and keep up to date. And, you know, because you end up putting money into any software tool. I mean, even so-called free software tools, open source, nothing wrong with those, but there's a cost involved. You got to learn how to use it. You know, you got to, again, keep things up to date and so on. So anyway, we have this thing called the collector. And if I can find my Zoom session, I'll cancel that. I'm going to find my little annotation spotlight tool. There we go. So this collector is something that we actually let you download from the the software itself. So inside our netTerrain product, and under tools or under help, actually, you go to utilities, and there's a thing called the collector, and it's executable. It's so the one thing about the collector is it has to run on a Windows machine. You're not going to install this on Linux or Mac or anything like that. So you have to run it on a Windows machine, typically on a Windows server, but you could run it on your desktop, laptop, etc. And so what that ends up giving you is this collector. Sorry, click my collector. There we go. So it ends up giving you the this collector tool, which this is where you sort of get into the automation side of the house as far as doing, you know, discovery and that sort of thing. So, but what does that mean? Discovery and so on. So let's say you have a blank diagram, you know, clean piece of paper, and you're like, I want to fill this with network devices. I want to show how they might connect together, or how they, you know, we view them as having connections. You can take this collector tool and go to SNMP, because that's really the discovery side. And you do a configuration. You come in here and say, hey, I'm going to do a discovery. I want to put in my IP address ranges, individual IP. And then you go through the process of putting in certain settings. So for us, you put in the range, you know, 1 to 254, or it could be broader. You can do some CEDAR numbers in here as well. Enable it or put it in, leave it disabled for now. And then you have a version, right? So if I want to do version 2C or version 1 or version 3 of your community string. So to do discovery, you need SNMP enabled devices, at least a core device like a router. And then you can do like a seed discovery. So if you're talking about one IP address, but if you have a whole range, then you would go in and configure that. IPv6, no. Currently, our ranges of discovery are just the base ranges, version 4. So it's a good question. I don't think we've talked too much internally about supporting V6 discovery. Good question. So thanks for that. So, and then you put your credentials in. If it's V3, there's more stuff you got to put in, right? There's all kinds of authentication, encryption. It doesn't matter. It should support all three. And then there's some more options you can get into, which are just like UDP port, if it's a different port, and like a simple description of that particular range, if you want to do that too. There are advanced options you can get into as well, where you're deciding if you're going to enable or disable certain things, and layer 2 or layer 3 discovery. If there's something you want to leave out, like you don't care about layer 3, you're like, oh, just leave out the routing table stuff. That's fine. These are kind of the same tabs, except one is for seed, the seed discovery, and one's for just the global range discovery. So that's all good. So you go through this process of configuring your SNMP discovery, and then you close this out. And then you would go up and press the scan button. And then it goes through and starts scanning all your devices. And I'm not going to necessarily hit the scan button, but I need to, well, I'll do that in a minute. I think I'm on my VPN, so I may try and show a push here in a minute. But so you go through, do this scan discovery, and then you can see what you discovered, right? So I had some stuff in red because I messed up on my MFA. I had to put a different user in. That's why I was adding users. So I'll clear that out. But so you do this discovery, and on the left-hand side, you're going to start to see things that are discovered. The typical things you're going to see are connections, which is what you see on the left. And then below that are the range of things that you discovered. So in my case, the one range that I went out and did a discovery on would show up. And then on the right, basically shows me things in blue, because it's basically saying, hey, these are the things that are currently pushed into the documentation diagram into netTerrain. That's why they're blue. I think white are ones that haven't been pushed, and so on. So that's kind of the process for doing discovery. Now, you don't have to just do SNMP discovery. You could integrate with another system, like if you're doing SolarWinds, that's pretty popular. We can use their APIs and connect to your SolarWinds instance and then bring devices or, already discovered information from that tool. So, if you're already doing SNMP discovery with SolarWinds, there's not necessarily a reason to do another SNMP discovery with our tool, because SolarWinds is going to do a pretty good job of it, because they do, monitoring and discovery and that sort of thing. But there's other tools you can integrate with. You can see a list, but most of those are using the product's APIs. But it is part of automation. I mean, if you're going to automate, you might want to look at various tools. Now, just because it's not on this list doesn't mean we don't support it, because we can build connectors to different APIs. So, different version. REST API build connectors. We have some more connectors that are coming out soon, like PRTG and Zabbix, and I think What's Up Gold. So you'll see those down the road as well. But if there's other tools you have that's not listed, hey, you can always talk to us. But yeah, service. What is the integration with ServiceNow? So there's a question around ServiceNow. ServiceNow for us is really about assets. It's not the ticketing side. It's really about the asset side. So if you're using asset ServiceNow, where you're getting hardware, devices, router, switches, using a kind of asset management, we can bring those devices across. So there's a white paper on our website about one of our customers who does the ServiceNow integration and kind of how they're using it. So you can check that out on our website under the white paper section. I don't know exactly where that is, but so anyway, back to discovery. So if you don't have anything, like you're not doing discovery right now, or you don't have documentation, you want to do a discovery, that's where you get again into SNMP. So you go out, you do your scan, you get your discovered items, and then you have all this wonderful stuff that that comes across. Now, what we do in netTerrain is we look at the discovered device object ID. And if you're not real familiar with SNMP, it's okay. It's basically the system object identifier that says, hey, this is a Juniper EX3300. Most manufacturers have a unique OID for each of their models. It's not always the case. I think I've seen a few where they're sort of use this generic OID that covers sort of a whole range of devices that are basically the same. But and then what happens is these get mapped. This OID is in our catalog, the netTerrain catalog in netTerrain, and they just get mapped together. So when you discover a device, it looks up the OID and then says, okay, that's this device in netTerrain. And if for whatever reason the OID isn't there, which happens, you can do your own mapping. You can come down here and say, oh, this switch, this Cisco, whatever it is, I'm double click on it, C2960X, I could right click and do a map type and basically C2960 and go and look this up. Right. So if there is a 2960 C, yeah, so there's a whole bunch. So of course you'd have to know if it's a particular flavor of 2960. I'll assume it's the 24S. Just hit apply, and then it maps it. So it's not terribly hard to do. You don't have to. You only do it for one of that object type, and then it'll apply to all the others because it shares the same OID, right? So, and then you're good to go. And then it updates and so on. And then you push this, and then it creates this in netTerrain. It creates the objects, the device types, and creates the connections and so on. And what does that look like? Well, let me go back to my netTerrain, and I'm going to show that to you. So I have this predefined diagram, so I'm not going through that whole process. You guys can certainly test this out if you want to try it out in your network environment. But this is effectively what you end up with. As you press push on the collector, it pushes the information into netTerrain, puts it into a diagram. So this diagram range, it's the IP range of what I did a discovery on. And then if everything's mapped, which in this case I had mapped them before, I can click on a device and you'll see things like the uptime and the object ID and some other sort of standard information for SNMP and those devices, right? So it goes through and does this discovery. And now usually this diagram isn't going to look like this. It's going to be kind of a little crazy. It's going to be sort of everything, kind of jumbled up in the upper left corner. And then what happens is when you go in this diagram, there's some different tools for arranging things, but one of those is called force directed layout. And then I can click OK on that, and it'll lay things out for me. It's not perfect by any stretch. I mean, a lot of these things I just manually moved and said, oh, I'm going to put this here, and I use some of the other settings like display grid and snap to grid to help kind of lock things in place and make it a little easier to clean up. But yeah, it was a little work involved. But once things are set, moved into place, they'll stay where they're at. If you look at all these devices on the right-hand side, you'll see a big list of them. I can actually turn things on and off. So if there's certain things I don't want to see, I can get rid of them. Same with links. I have different link types as well. Where's the expression that utilizes your host name? Both. Can you group devices? So someone was asking about grouping devices and generate diagrams based on regular expressions that utilized either host name, syslocation, or both. I think I need more info about that question. You don't typically group devices based on a name or something. Although, interestingly enough, we are working on something to do that, mainly because we're adding some functionality for AWS objects. So like the EC2 instances, other things to help lay things out in a diagram. And some of that I think is based around actually host name more than anything. And I think syslocation to a certain extent, but out of the box currently, no, I don't do, I think, what you're looking to do there. So I'm just letting you know that. But I'm happy to talk to you in more detail about the question. So, you lay this out, and all these things have, data fields that you can certainly turn on and off. So if there's something you want to display, you can, and I can say apply to type for all the other types of this instance if I want to also display that as well and have the names, and you can add color and fill color and all kinds of good stuff. So there's a lot of functionality in actually creating the connections and so on. So someone's asking about specific wireless access points, Meraki and Mimosa. I only know that as a drink, but yeah. So I think we have some Meraki in there, not a ton, but our catalog is pretty extensive. But if you're missing something, you can model it yourself in our tool. You don't need us to do it. But if you're a customer, we will model things for you. So if you're like, hey, I need a Meraki XYZ, it's not in my catalog, you open a ticket and then we'll create it and send it back to you and you can import it. We try and turn those around within 24 to 48 hours. So you get those back pretty quickly. My experience has been, for the most part, if you're asking for like one device, it's usually next day we'll send it to you. So we're pretty good about that. So on the right-hand side, you'll see links. You see a list. It says SNMP, ARP, CDP, routing. So those are things you can turn off. You can say, oh, I don't want to see the routing in the bridge. I just want to see LLDP and CDP. Show me the connections there. So of course your Cisco devices, you're probably going to have a bit of CDP. But then you can come back here and kind of explore, where these connections are coming from in the data. So other questions? Geolocated. Well, you can have devices show up, get moved basically based on something like if you have a location and it's got a 2-digit code, you could run something where it basically moves all those to, let's say, a corresponding site with that 2-digit code. You can do things on the front end where you define a parent object. So if there's a field that tells me the parent of this, and the parent happens to be like a location, like the sys location, like lab maintenance, you could say, hey, look at the sys location. And if there's a matching parent object, lab maintenance, go ahead and put this inside that location. So you can do that as well. You can also do latitude and longitude stuff. So if you want to position things lat and long, that's usually not for devices. That's more for usually buildings or things like that. Multiple switches. Yeah. So we do stack switches as well, stack switch support. In fact, these guys here are part of a stack, these two. we just separate the devices out of a stack. I mean, you can stack them together and put them in a rack for that matter. You know, I can take these and either cut them, or I can do what we call a copy alias. And if I want to, you know, grab a cabinet of some sort and put those into the cabinet, I paste. I wouldn't do this normally here, but oops, they got slung off the screen for some reason. All right. So then I could, you know, lock these into place and put them in the right position. So then I can have them in both places. I can have them here, but also in the cabinet. And they're actually equal to each other. They would be in sync with each other. So it's kind of nice. Yeah, so there's stack switch for HP, Juniper, and Cisco, which HP I think is Aruba, or they own Aruba or something. So I think the Arubas are fine to do the whole stack sort of discovery. But anyway, let me check the time. Sorry, yeah, we're about out of time here. So I hope that makes sense. You know, doing this discovery and kind of pushing data and all that stuff. You guys can try this out if you want. You can sign up and download the collector. Again, I'll mention the collector. It's under tools or help, utilities, and you get the collector. And then you install the collector, you put in your ranges, start discovering data, and then you push the data into netTerrain. Inside the collector, there is a setting over here under server where you'll put in your credentials for your server, use your password. It'll be SSL. So if you test it out in netTerrain US, then they would download, install, upload, and so on. So I'll give you that site here. Let me bring up my crazy slide deck. Questions, netTerrain action, we did that. Questions, you had a bunch, which is great. Let me see. Oh, here we go. So yeah, Fred put it in here. It's netterrain.us. However, I would not sign up today for that. I would wait a couple days. And the reason I say that is because we're upgrading netTerrain US to version 9.5 tomorrow. Well, should be shooting for tomorrow, but I would, you know, to play it safe, I think Friday is probably more appropriate. So, you know, it's a 14-day thing. You don't need a credit card. Literally, it's an email address. I just signed up myself today because I was testing on our other platform. And yeah, I mean, that's it. You can download a collector, install it, and test it out, kick the tires. But I recommend you give us a shout, you know, if you're going to do that after the fact or whatever. If you have questions, you know, if you get stuck, let us know. Yeah, Chris, just reach out. If you reach out to Fred, fred.co@graphicalnetworks.com. Just shoot him an email and just say, hey, I want a 30-minute call, 15-minute call, whatever, talk about what we're trying to do, right? A single collector can handle, there was a question around how many devices a single collector can handle. I mean, I've seen thousands of devices discovered in a single collector. So, yeah, I mean, it's made to be pretty robust. I would imagine there's some top end number. I don't know what that is really, because it can also depend on the types of devices, I'm sure, you know, number of ports, because, you know, we discover ports inside that data collection. So you could have some devices that have literally thousands of ports probably. So if you have, you know, thousands of those, yeah, I don't know kind of where you end up, but it should be pretty good for the most part. But if you have questions, you know, we can talk to you more about it. But again, I think testing out. How do you collect number 2 if you have a crazy large amount of network? Click number 2. Well, I guess what you're asking about is multiple networks, I guess, within sort of the whole project. So you can definitely, yeah, 5,000 hosts, that's fine. Yeah. You're not going to put all 5,000 hosts in one diagram. You're going to spread those out, of course, in, oh, and that maybe that's your question. If you have like 5,000 show up in one drawing, we don't do that. We segment them out into those different sort of network ranges, and you wouldn't want to put them all into one range. That you don't want to do. It's a good question. I usually limit it to, you know, I try and keep it at like maybe 1,000 or even under 500, you know, per sort of diagram. Because you know, you're still going to have to do something with all that data and start to move things around and decide how you want things to look, right? as far as the diagrams go. So again, if you want 30 minutes talking with myself and Fred, he's a sales guy, but he's a nice guy. he's no arm twisting. We want to make sure it's the right fit for what you're trying to do. So we can talk to you about it. Go into a little more in depth as far as the demo goes. So anyway, sorry, I hit the top of the mark. So I'll let you guys go, but yeah, reach out, fred.co graphical network. So go to graphicalnetworks.com, netterrain.us, probably Friday, sign up. And I think you'll be good to go as far as, giving a test if you want to kick the tires, so to speak. So good stuff. And thanks everybody for the questions. Oh, wait, there's a couple more. Which product handles data center related info, racks, PDUs, etc.? Technically, that would be netTerrain DCIM. But if you want also the fiber strands and cables, then you add OSP to it. So netTerrain DCIM, that's what you want if you want racks and all that. So good stuff. All right, thanks guys. It was nice. Good stuff. I like lots of questions. Always good. Much better webinar. So you guys take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.